Hey everyone, it's Jose, and I've sort of made a shocking discovery that I believe puts at least 1 million Android users at risk of identity theft and data theft. So, for a few months now, I've known about apps like these GBox and GSpace, which are third party apps that are supposed to give like a modern day Huawei phone, which doesn't have Google Play services, the ability to use any app that requires on dependencies like Google mobile services. So basically, how they work is that you download these apps, and inside the app, you have access to a clone of the Google Play Store, and it has built in Google mobile services. So you can use apps like Uber on your Huawei phone, which doesn't have Google mobile services, but inside these two apps, you can use apps like Uber and properly use them because it's emulating Google mobile services dependencies. So they're basically creating a virtual machine inside the app. And basically, well, it's not open source. Like these apps are proprietary and it's not open source, unlike other open source virtualizers like Island, which I haven't used before, but that seems to be very popular. So at least that's open source and at least that can be audited. But with these two, they're not open source, and I found some pretty shady behavior behind them. So because they're not open source, whenever you use these apps and log into your Uber account, Google account, WhatsApp account, while you're putting your trust into these apps because you are putting your credentials into the virtualizers, and since it's not open source, well, we don't know if they're stealing any credentials or any data that you will basically generate. So that's what I'm going to go over now. Obviously, I can't make any claims that they are stealing your data or they're not stealing your data or they're malware or whatever. It's just a deep dive into the behavior of these apps and trying to figure out what makes apps like these dangerous, closed source virtualizers where you have to put your trust into these apps by giving them your credentials and basically using your entire phone within these two apps. So basically, we have GBox and GSpace, and just on the surface, it looks like it has built-in GMS, so you can use any app that requires GMS dependencies. It says it has no ads, it says it's easy to use, and it says privacy guarantee. We don't collect any personal data and ensure your data security and privacy. And then we look at GSpace, which basically does the same thing, built-in GMS, dual accounts, easy to use, and safety protection. Now, if you're already caught on, these two websites are basically the same. They have a very similar layout, built-in GMS, built-in GMS. This is dual counts. This is no ads, easy to use, privacy guarantee, and safety protection. Like, it's pretty much implied, as I will explain later on, that these two apps are basically the same app. If the web design doesn't already give it away, I will show you right now why it's basically the same app. Now, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you're going to see right here, GBox, all rights reserved, and GSpace, all rights reserved. So they're obviously different names, GBox and GSpace. However, if we use the Wayback Machine, and go on to September of 2022. This is the GBox website. On the bottom, it's going to say GSpace. Now, the updated website says GBox, but obviously we can see right here that it's very likely that the people who developed GSpace also developed GBox, or the company that owns GSpace also owns GBox. That's basically enough evidence to suggest that GSpace and GBox are basically the same company. Well, what's even kind of weirder is that every website has a privacy policy and terms of service. It's just basic procedure, and I think even required by law in a lot of different countries. Now, in GBox, if you click privacy policy, nothing happens. If you click terms of use, nothing happens. Same thing for GSpace. Privacy policy, not functional. Terms of service, not functional. Not having a privacy policy or terms of service functioning web page is a red flag, because basically not only are you required by law in a lot of different places to have a privacy policy or terms of use, it's that not having a functioning web page for either of them is a red flag, because you don't know how the data is being processed and you don't know how the apps are supposed to be intended to be used by the user without violating any sort of license or, again, their terms of use. So not having that proper documentation of how your data is processed and retained should be very concerning. However, I did manage to find the privacy policy and terms of use for GSpace, but unfortunately not for GBox. And the way I did that is I just searched it up on DuckDuckGo, GSpace terms of service, GSpace privacy policy, and I did find them. So here we have the privacy policy of GSpace. You can see all the necessary information like how they process your data. And it's right here in bold. While we do not collect any personal information, according to them, they do collect the basic information like analytics and device information and stuff like that, crash logs, stuff like that. There are a few things I did find concerning. One of the first things is that there's like a social media function inside the app where I guess you can use, of course, Instagram, Facebook, whatever you want inside of GSpace, because it is emulating Google mobile services. So something that they do collect is they collect information based off your friends or contacts list, notes, updates, which might be like social statuses and stuff like that, photos and other relevant information, which if you ask me, contacts list, notes, like that's personal information. But it says right here, like, we do not collect any personal information. Even so, it says we do not collect any social network information, even though you just basically said contacts list, notes, update, and stuff like that. Now, I'm not exactly sure what even the social network function is. Again, I just think it's just like using Instagram properly inside of GSpace, because it requires GMS and stuff like that. So it's just weird overall that their privacy policy is a little bit contradicting, or at the very least, kind of vague and confusing. And it says right here that they're basically allowed to share whatever collected information with trusted third-party suppliers and whoever they want, right? Now, these trusted third-party suppliers, it could literally mean anyone. It could be analytics, it could be for statistics, it could be literally anyone. It can even be like Instagram themselves or Uber themselves when you emulate their app inside of GSpace. But at the same time, like, this collection of data and giving it a third parties, obviously that's a red flag, especially when we're dealing with personal information and application data on a virtual machine scale, which is basically how the app functions. It's a virtual machine, and any credentials you put in there, any application data you generate is basically subjected to being shared to some extent. Now, something I find to be really weird is that GBox specifically has a blog page where they compare themselves with GSpace and basically kind of persuade you as to why GBox is better than GSpace, even though I just showed you in the Wayback Machine that GBox was basically owned by GSpace at some point. So that's really weird. I'm not sure why that's there, but it's there. And I don't know. I find that to be suspicious that you compare yourselves to basically your former self, which is really weird if that is true. Now, what also matters more is that how do these apps behave? Like, are they a virus? Well, according to VirusTotal, both for GBox and GSpace, it's in another tab, nothing really came up, nothing flagged them. However, how do they behave? So in this behavior tab for GBox, we could find a lot of different ways on how this app behaves. Some of it is not really a surprise because it is a virtualizer, it is a virtual machine, so that it does have to do specific things. But other things I find to be quite shady, so let's go over that. So you can find typical things like, yeah, it uses HTTPS, which is like standard, right? And it could have like read or write storage and stuff like that. But there are a few things that are really suspicious. So one of the first things is basically this one. Security software discovery may try to detect the virtual machine to hinder analysis with VM artifact strings found in memory. Now, I don't exactly know what this means, but my interpretation based off this little information blip is that despite this being a virtual machine and stuff like that, of course, the app can access data outside the virtual machine and even inside the virtual machine because it basically controls itself. So something they could do, I don't know if it does this, but I'm just rating based off this info blip, is that it can like read the device's security configurations. It can scan basically its surroundings and use that information for its own benefit if an adversary was to attack your device somehow by basically scanning the device's configurations. Now, it doesn't necessarily do that because I'm pretty sure it would have been flagged, but it's still scary that, this little blip comes up saying that this app does have the capability of doing something like this. And another thing it can do is that it can store application data, of course, because it's a virtual machine. But something that's kind of scary is that it can basically try to access data. Here we go. It can try to access data specifically that app generated. So like, let's say Gmail, all your cached emails after you basically retrieve them, well, it's going to obviously have to write it into storage if it wants to be cached. And it's possible that all this application data is stored in plain text, or at the very least, the encryption keys are kept by GSpace, GBox, and they have those keys to basically extract the encrypted data at any point because they assign those keys to begin with. Now, of course, not saying that's true. I'm saying based off these blips, the app has the capability of doing stuff like this. And this one's even more scary. It has this read logs permission, which can be used to obtain private keys, passwords, credentials, any stored format. And because it's a virtualizer, of course, it has this sort of permission. It has to be able to read every bit of information for these apps to work and implement GMS into it. But it's still very scary that this app has to do it anyways. And at the very bottom, it gives us this little detection system rule that basically says potential corporate privacy violation, which might have to do with something on how it interacts with Google and stuff like that. But from what I've seen, this is not, of course, definitive because it says potential, but it's not even super critical. It's basically the least of our worries right here. But everything else I can do, yeah, it makes sense. Record audio, has access to phone location. It's a virtualizer. All the apps inside of it has the potential to, of course, like pull up stuff. But it's still scary that a closed source virtualizer has all these permissions anyways, and you're giving your trust into apps like these. Now, something that's like, of course, more scary than any of these is a keylogger, which if there was a keylogger, I'm pretty sure it'll pull it up right here. But even so, reading application data, like you could have a keylogger or you can just access the data itself. So yeah. Now if we switched over to GSpace, which, well, the first thing that it says is ZenBox Android says malware banker Trojan invader, which is a collection of it being malware, a banker, a Trojan, and an invader. But just having this overall, that's scary. Like it's being flagged as a Trojan. Not saying there is a Trojan inside of it because nothing really was detected, but it shows that it has behavior of being a Trojan, which is of course scary. It has the same basically rules, like it can try to detect the virtual machine, yeah, all these permissions, access to low level log files, access to your keys, access to GPS, everything else, right? But these two rules are different. This is the same, and it's not, again, critical, but these are critical. Now, from what I could understand, is that it does something with how internet packets are signed or or put in transit or stuff like that. And from what I see on the top, it looks like it's trying to do some detection of your packets itself. So I'm not saying it assigns its own, I don't know, SSL credentials and decrypts them whenever necessary. But based off this behavior, it looks like it could be possible. So at the very least, GSpace is more dangerous than GBox based off the behavior and the permissions it's capable of doing. But then again, as I said before, it's also implied that the people behind GSpace also developed GBox. So who isn't to say that GBox is just a little bit more sneakier than GSpace without having all these permissions pop up like that? Also, just to make sure that GSpace and GBox, well, there's no like false positives, or if the crowdsourced rules are wrong or not that significant or whatever else. What basically I did is I downloaded this app cloner app, which is not on the Play Store. It's its own APK. And basically what it does is it clones any app you have on your phone. So it's like parallel apps at the same time, right? And this is a closed source app. It's not open source, just making sure that whatever the app cloner does, is it present in, GBox and GSpace. And what I found is similar things, not exactly the same, like this access to, application data, like, yeah, this app cloner can do, and it can do other things, check internet connection. This rule is new, but at the same time, it's not critical as how I interpret it. But basically, it's safe to say that at the very least, this closed source app cloner isn't as dangerous as GSpace or GBox, given just the behavior blips that pop up. So yeah, so it looks like GBox and GSpace, well, isn't necessarily an isolated incident or whatever I'm trying to imply, other than just an app cloner is, well, works as intended, and those virtualizers have way more permissions and way more blips that appear to be, potentially concerning compared to this alternative. Now, besides being closed sourced apps, like, not these are closed source apps that you have to give your credentials in order for these apps to work, because you have to sign into the Play Store within the virtualizers. You have to sign into WhatsApp inside the virtualizer. You have to sign into your banking accounts, because you can download whatever apps are available in the Play Store inside these virtualizers. Like, can you trust these closed source apps? Like, you have to ask questions like these. And another question you can ask are, well, who are the developers? Are they credible? If anything goes wrong, can we hold them accountable? Well, according to GBox, it says they've been founded in Singapore in 2018 by this company, Virtual Cube PTE Ltd, right? And right here, if we just basically look up their name, their company name, it checks out. Like, there is a company registered in Singapore with this exact same name. But I have evidence to suggest that besides being registered in Singapore and this possibly being a shell company, this GBox company might actually have ties to Hong Kong and China. So what about GSpace? Like, where are they from? Well, from all the information I could really gather, which is their email address, which has a really weird domain at 163.com. Now, if you go to 163.com, it's basically a just Chinese news website, very similar to Yahoo. And this 163.com domain, I believe, is like basically they're just like free or paid email service. So it's like going to like Yahoo and registering for a Yahoo Mail and having like X at yahoo.com. Well, this is like their X at 163.com. So it doesn't look like they own 163 or anything like that, but it does sort of lean closer as to why would you use a basically Chinese, very specific web domain email provider. Well, it's very likely you come from China to begin with, or at the very least, Hong Kong, as I will show right now. So if you just do a simple whois identity lookup, you would find that their domain, gspaceteam.com, is registered with Alibaba. That comes from China. And one of the domains listed from VirusTotal that GSpace does ping, the app itself, one of them comes from a Hong Kong Amazon web server. Now, you could have just used, like, I guess, Alibaba instead of Amazon web server, but I mean, that's fine. Hong Kong is, to some extent, still part of China. So, GSpace and the GSpace team from their 163.com domain and from this Alibaba listing or registration for domain information, it looks like the GSpace team does come from China. I also just checked out the IP addresses for what GBox pings, and basically nothing necessarily suspicious came up. Everything basically just comes from Google. It's like Google, their web servers and stuff like that. Everything's in the United States. Nothing's, overseas or outside of Singapore or anything like that. Well, overseas for, Singapore from being United States, but it's just Google stuff. It's nothing suspicious like the Alibaba stuff or Hong Kong, AWS, or anything like that. So just to quickly wrap things up, it looks like just the way they work is they use a virtualizer emulating GMS, and that's how you're basically able to use YouTube, Gmail, Uber, Instagram, any app that's on the Play Store, you're able to emulate GMS with it. And people who use Huawei phones are very likely to use GBox and GSpace because modern Huawei phones don't have Google mobile services. And the thing is that both of these apps are closed source, and VirusTotal basically explains it all. Yeah, they're virtualizers. Yeah, of course, they have to read application data because how else would they work? How else would they inject GMS into the apps and do everything? So, yeah. And it looks like GSpace and GBox belong to the same company, as I explained with this GSpace right here. It's right here, gboxlab.com on September 19, 2022. Very likely the same exact company behind it. And we don't know much about the developers. Like GSpace, we know nothing about. And GBox Lab, well, yeah, they gave us a company name, but does that say much about the developers, especially with the possibility that GSpace and GBox are related, and GSpace, at the very least, somewhat based in China, and these people are based in Singapore. It could easily be a shell company. I don't know, but it's still very weird, to say the very least. What's also not so clear is that how do GSpace and GBox make any money? Because according to GBox, in one of their YouTube videos where they compare themselves to GSpace, apparently GSpace runs on a subscription model, even though it says free download APK. Like, it uses a subscription model to update Play services and do all these things. However, GBox, to the very least, is completely free. No ads, and stuff like that. Of course, I haven't downloaded these apps because I suspect them to be malicious to the very least, or I just don't trust them personally. So I haven't downloaded these apps and looked into them, but it looks like with no ads and stuff like that, like how does GBox make money? Now we did read the privacy policy of GSpace, and they share data with third parties, not personal data according to them, but still data of some kind. And GBox, well, I can't read their privacy policy, which again, concerning, should raise some red flags that they don't have proper documentation for this. But how does GBox make money? No clue. Something that is really baffling is that there are plenty of videos with GBox, right? Like GBox tutorials. Here's from YugaTech, a verified tech channel with over 500,000 subscribers. And this video was posted in December of 2022, and it already has 1.5 million views. This is one of the most viewed GBox videos ever. And if you look at their channel, this is basically one of their top performing videos of all time. And it's on an app that is closed source, virtualizes Android and emulates GMS, and you're giving your credentials to an app like this. This is insane. This is where I said in the start of the video, there are potentially more than 1 million people who use a Huawei phone and use GBox because they don't have GMS. And that's just baffling that many people, possibly 1 million people, are just giving their credentials away without really raising questions as to, should I use GBox? Who are the people behind GBox? How does GBox, have, data integrity, protect my privacy? Well, their privacy policy doesn't work. We don't know much about the developers. They say they're from Singapore, but possibly have connections with China. It's super weird. This whole app is super weird. And of course, you have to download this app from the website. Like, it's not on the Google Play Store, obviously, because it's emulating GMS. But what if it has malware? What about the stuff I showed you with VirusTotal and its behavior? Like, all these millions of people didn't ask none of those questions. They just downloaded it because they bought a Huawei phone without GMS, and now they're subjected to leaving a Trojan to their device. And it honestly sucks for them. So, what if you don't have Google mobile services on your phone? What if you have a Huawei phone that runs Harmony OS and doesn't have Google mobile services? What can you do? Well, I have 3 pieces of advice. The first one is download the Aurora store from the official website and just download the APK. Now, unlike GBox and GSpace, Aurora store is open source. And what Aurora store does is it's a front end for the Google Play Store. So you can just download it on your phone because it's completely open source. So you can, at the very least, trust it because we can properly audit it. And you just basically search up whatever app you want, let's say Uber, and you can download Uber like straight from the Aurora store. You don't need to sign into a Google account. You don't need to pay anything. It's open source. It's free software. Just download Uber. Now, something I also like about it is that it shows you like what Google dependencies does that app require. So like Uber, it's going to show you, yeah, you need Play services for Uber to properly work. However, that shouldn't stop you from at least downloading Uber and seeing if it will work without Google mobile services. Now, it's very likely it won't work, but at least you can try. Same thing with like COD Mobile. If COD Mobile or whatever app is only available on the Play Store, then just try to download it and see if it will work without having Google mobile services installed on your phone. It's already a way better solution than using a closed source virtualizer like GBox or GSpace. Now, your Huawei phone has a Play Store, well, an app store, It's called AppGallery. I'm sure you'll be familiar with it. Not every app, of course, is on AppGallery. It's up to publishers to publish their app on AppGallery. But as you see here, there's a lot of apps natively on AppGallery. Like if you want TikTok, TikTok is there. If you want, I don't know, Tinder's there. Like it's available literally inside of AppGallery, and they come from the official sources. Like I know Office 365 and I think even Snapchat is in the AppGallery. So if you just want to check if an app is there, just download it from AppGallery. At least try there first. Before even going to the Aurora store, try AppGallery. But sometimes you will come across an app, let's say like WhatsApp, and WhatsApp is not in the AppGallery, but it'll still show a download link. If it says like install from APK Pure or use like a web installer or whatever external links it's gonna give you, just don't download it from APK Pure or those APK websites. Just rather stick with Aurora store if it's not already available on AppGallery. I also know there's pedal search where you can literally search up apps. It's the same thing inside of AppGallery, but it's the same thing. If it says download from this APK website or download from this third-party website, just don't download it. Just download it from Aurora store if you really need those apps. Another piece of advice is try to see if the website actually has the APKs that you're looking for. So this is the official WhatsApp website. And you can see it says get it on Google Play, but on your Huawei phone, you obviously can't have that. So here you go, package installer. You can literally download WhatsApp from the official website. So instead of using those GSpace, GBox virtualizers, which they do advertise support for WhatsApp and stuff like that, just don't even use it in there. Use the official APK website. That's already way better. No need to go to the Aurora store either, because these package installers were made to run without Google mobile services, as opposed to Aurora store just being based off the Play Store itself. So of course, it's very likely that those like apps are dependent on Google mobile services. But even so, you can just download WhatsApp from the website, which is specifically optimized to run on phones without Google mobile services. So that's already, again, way better than using a virtualizer. Just search if the app is available to install online from an official source, from the official WhatsApp page. Like, yeah. And also a really nice piece of advice is, let's say you want like Twitter or Reddit or anything else, but you know, you don't want to download it on the Aurora store. It's not available on the official websites. Like, how do you get these APKs, or at the very least use Twitter on your phone without having the official app? Well, because it's a web app. Well, without being a web app, like if you can use it on desktop, then it's very likely that there's an open source client to use specifically something like Twitter. So for example, I've covered a lot on this channel. For example, Fritter. Fritter is an open source client for Twitter, which I have covered before, and it gives you the entire Twitter experience within an app that you can download from F-Droid or the GitHub or the Git repository or anywhere. There's a lot of places you can download Fritter, but the best place or the easiest, most convenient is from F-Droid, the F-Droid app. It's completely open source. It has built-in customization, additional customization features that the official Twitter app doesn't have. You don't even need to use an account. You don't need to sign into your account to use it. Like, there's just so many good ones. Like, there's also Infinity for Reddit, which I have used before. Really great app, really customizable, more customizable than Reddit. It's really nice. Like, of course, open source, privacy respecting. There's also Twire for Twitch, which if you want the full Twitch experience without I think you actually have to log in to use it, but Twire, like it blocks ads, it has additional features that's not available in the official Twitch app. Like just try to use an open source client. Like there are so many out there for a bunch of different things. Now there's not an open source client, for example, like Uber, like you're not gonna find one. At least I don't think that one exists. But even so, just try to be like, okay, Twitch and open source client. Just try to search it up on like Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever you use. And I'm pretty sure there will be one for the most part. There's not for Instagram because that actually got shut down. That's a long story, but yeah. And even so, if you ask me in the comments down below, hey, is there an open source privacy respecting client for whatever? I'll try to find one. I'll try to give you a recommendation on an alternative, or even tell you like, yeah, that's not available. You need to download it from the Aurora store, like the official APK, let's say for Uber Eats, because there's no open source client for Uber Eats. But I'll just, if you commenting down below, coming from GSpace and GBox, looking for an alternative client or open source client, if that's all it takes to get you off of GBox and GSpace, then just comment down below and I'll try to help you out. You can ask literally as many questions as you want. I need an app for this. I'll try to help you out. Way better than getting your credentials or putting them at risk inside a virtualizer. So just ask. I'll try to help. And I guess that's the end of the video. Like, GSpace and GBox, very shady in my opinion, but everything I said is not definitive. It's all speculation based off of what I have observed. And I've observed a lot of things. The privacy policy doesn't work for both sides. GSpace used to own GBox or does own GBox, as seen with the web archive snapshot from, September of 2022, which is very recent. And GSpace is registered with Alibaba, uses Hong Kong AWS servers, very least probably Chinese. But GBox is apparently based in Singapore. That could be a shell company. It could not. I have no idea. But at the same time, we know nothing about the developers. Sure, it says they're based in Singapore. Sure, it's a real registered company. But if anything goes wrong with GBox, can we hold anyone accountable? Is anyone there credible? Do we know anything about these developers? Like, it's the same thing. Developers are unknown. And when your developers are unknown, that is a risk, no matter what app it is, especially for it being a closed source virtualizer of Android. Like you're really putting a lot of trust into these apps. I certainly wouldn't. It's closed sourced. And even so, there are alternatives. Like, just use Aurora store. Go download Aurora store. If you're using GBox and GSpace, use Aurora store. Re-download all your apps. And even though Uber uses dependencies and stuff like that, just try to see if these apps will work. If they don't work, then honestly, there are other methods, like download the official APK from the websites or use an open source client. But not having GMS, Google Play Services, is unfortunately a problem. And it's a problem for everyone who owns a Huawei phone in 2022 and 2023 and beyond. We're really dependent on GMS, and that honestly sucks. That could be another argument for another day. But yeah, you use AppGallery if you can. Maybe the apps will be there. However, if it says download from APK Pure, use pedal search. Like, don't use pedal search and don't download from APK Pure. Try Aurora store. Like, I'm gonna keep repeating myself. Like, that's literally your best option. Download from Aurora store and just see if it works. But yeah, overall, like, honestly, seeing that Yuga Tech video with over 1 million views, there's probably over 1 million people using GBox, and that's honestly really concerning. So hopefully if you're one of those users, or if you do know a user, just tell them to stop. Tell them, just educate them. Don't even tell them to stop. Just educate them and let them make their own decisions, whether they keep wanting to use GBox or GSpace. But just hopefully this video was nothing but informative and at least educated you on something, whether you use GSpace or not. So yeah, hopefully you learned something from this. And yeah, I guess that's about it. So bye bye.